Greetings and salutations. Welcome to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Before we begin, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share this show with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. My guest today is an award-winning playwright with production stage internationally. Awards and distinctions include the Susan Glaspell Award for H TLER'S TASTERS and the Riva Shiner Comedy Award for KALAMAZOO, co-written with Kelly Younger. Room 1214 was a finalist for the Ashland New Plays Festival, and her play Hostage was a finalist for the Woodward Newman Drama Award, the Fratti-Newman Political Play Contest, and a showcase finalist for the National New Play Network. Other plays include War Words, Chair, and Project Fear and All the Feels. She earned her BA from Emerson College and an MFA in fiction from Otis College of Art and Design, and she was Playwright-in-Residence at New York Rep. On April 27th, H TLER'S TASTERS will return to Los Angeles at the Rogue Machine Theater. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Michelle Kholos Brooks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Always introduce me.
I appreciate that. So I could be completely wrong when I ask you this, but did you just come from rehearsal? Right.
They are rehearsing today, but I decided for where they are in their process, it was a good day to let them not have me in the room, sort of lurking about and doing judgy playwrighty things. So I decided to give them a break from me today, and I'll be back.
And where are they out in the process?
They're actually in a really, really good place. I mean, it's only been a little over a week of rehearsal, and they have sort of gotten through the play. The actors are wonderful. My director is one of my favorite people on the planet, and so things are going along well. But they're trying to sort of get the play in their bodies now. There's some choreography that goes along with it, and so they're trying to work out the transitions and how that affects the language and how they're coming in and out of things. So they have to get up and move around and do some things. And I think it's in a very small space, that Henry Murray stage at Rogue Machine. And so everybody, there's no distance between you and the audience. Sure, yeah. So I can feel sometimes that it might feel like a lot to also have me there. Mm-hmm. But I think, they're in a good spot. I think we're going to open on time, all being well.
And then, so when you say choreography, are we talking dance, or because there's so much timing in this movement, it's kind of becomes a work of choreography, and it's very timed and precise. Is that what we're talking about, or is it actually like there's a dance scene or two? There
is actual dance happening.
Okay. All right.
And because it's such a small, immersive space, they have to make sure, not to knock anything over, not to knock into each other. And, they just have to learn the choreography. These are not big sort of Broadway dance numbers by any stretch, but they are, they are playing young women and who are trying to figure out what to do with their time. And so one of the things that young women do in their off time is dance and do dance numbers together. And so we get to know the characters a little bit through even just the way that they dance, whether they're a very polished dancer, a very awkward dancer, how they interact with each other. And so so there is literally dance.
Is that the polished dancing? Is that, and the more experience, is that coming from a place of the character, or is that just because of the nature of the actor who's playing that particular role?
It's a little bit of a combination, but mostly it's coming from the character.
Okay.
There are characters that have a little more status and would never get a step wrong, and then other characters that are a little more awkward and arms are flailing. It's fun. It's really fun for me to watch them try to find themselves, and then trying to find their character through the dance, but also bring themselves into it.
Now, was that written in, or is that just something that's kind of a directorial choice?
It's not written in. When I wrote this play, there are a lot of transitional moments, and my direction in that was fill this time with things that girls do when they're killing time.
Nice, okay.
And I said it could be dance, it could be braiding each other's hair, it could be looking at, talking about movie stars, whatever it is. But, dance just sort of naturally, this particular production has had many productions with the same director, and Rogue Machine wanted this production to come over. So what Sarah Norris, the director, has devised is a particular routine, and I've really almost exclusively seen it that way. Wow. So it's hard. It's not in the script, but it's suggested in the script.
So what are these transitions then? I mean, is it we talking about this from scene 1 to scene 2, or is it a matter of time that's passed that's gone through? What do these transitions look like?
They're mostly time passing. Passing. Yeah. It's about the young German women who are conscripted to taste Adolf Hitler's food for poison. Mm-hmm. And so they have to eat and then wait and see if they're going to die. And there's time to fill in between that. So it's mostly about time.
You don't have to answer this in case it's a spoiler alert. Did anybody die from that? Anybody did wind up getting poisoned from?
In real life.
In real life.
In terms of my some of the research that I did, I don't think so.
Okay.
Now the girls that did this work, the ones who were there when the Russians came in, they all met mostly a pretty terrible end, but it didn't come from their food being poisoned.
Does that come into play there, or is that part of the play? Their untimely. Well, I don't want to say untimely deaths because I don't know what that is. I don't know what tragedy went behind it. I'm familiar somewhat with the story, but I don't know the historical details of what happened to these ladies after. So I'm just kind of curious. Do you go into that in the play, or do you this is just because you're obviously not going to tell the whole entire story? You're just taking a section of it to tell. So do we learn that, or is it maybe in the program?
No, this is just in the room. This is only in the room where they eat and wait to see what's going to happen.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Now, you went through, you said multiple renditions, and I do know that you got 2 performances before everything got shut down.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. Well, when it was in LA, it had been in 2020, March of 2020, it came to Los Angeles. New Light Theater Project brought it to Los Angeles. This is the company that I had worked with in New York, and also we had brought it to Edinburgh, to the Edinburgh Fringe.
Oh, very nice.
And everybody wanted to bring it out to LA. Got the whole cast and crew here, and then you know the story. But yeah, so I think we had 2 previews and then 1 show, and then we closed. All the actors had to go home, and we had to negotiate all of that. And it's been almost exactly 4 years. And it's just so funny to think of us, everybody saying, "We'll be 2 weeks. We're just going to be gone for 2 weeks, and then we'll be back and do the play." But it's kind of amazing that we're coming back to it now because there is a lot of shading of our current political situation, and we are in another election year, and things have gotten a little nuts, and so I think that somehow the play keeps becoming more and more relevant, which is not my wish.
Sure, of course. Has anything changed since you?
In the script?
Yes, from. Well, I mean, I guess it's already been through production somewhere else, so I guess it's going to be the same if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, there have been things, in the last few years. So the play is now published by TRW. Okay. So now we hold. But in all the years leading up to that, I was with the same team for many years in different cities, and there were a lot of things that were happening out in the world and the culture that felt relevant for what we were talking about. And so we would put in, I would always consult with, with the actors and the director and say like, "Hey, they just shut down Roe v. Wade. do you guys want to say something? And everybody would say, yeah, let's say something. And so I would write in a little something. For us, it was a nod. It was something. It was our activism to be able to incorporate these things into the play, because even though the play takes place in the closer toward the end of World War II, there are a lot of current references and anachronisms to make it feel like it's a little in and out of time. So there have been little things that have been added and along the way.
But nothing's changed from the first LA production, and now this current one. Nothing's changed throughout the play in that regard.
No, just like I said, just a few nods.
All right, that's right, because that had happened between 2020 and now.
Yeah.
And then did everybody? Is it the original cast, or did you have to?
It is not the original cast. They have. That original cast was magnificent, and they stayed with us for a long time. But they've since dispersed, and they have other things that they're doing, and other obligations, and most of them are not here in Los Angeles.
That was my next question. Did you cast locally?
Yeah, so we ended up casting. It's an all new cast. So that was interesting for me and for Sarah. We've worked with the same cast for so long and developed it for so long that there are certain things we just took for granted. So we've had to reset our minds a little bit and see what these new actors are bringing.
What have you, as a playwright, discovered working with an entire different cast compared to working with the same people?
It's just they're bringing their own experience. And so sometimes, a few times, I have just laughed out loud. It's hard for me to laugh at my own stuff, but certainly, after all this time. But they'll do a little, a spin on a line, or have a certain look or a certain movement that just really makes me laugh. And I think, oh my God, I didn't know that was there.
Interesting.
I don't know that one is better than the other. It's just different, and it's delightful to me to be able to keep finding different things in the characters at this point. It's thrilling.
What do you think? Where do you think the difference is? Do you think it's the difference in their LA actors? They're trained differently. There's more of a film and television background, or I don't know. I'm just curious from your point of view as a playwright, if you notice, if you can tell what the difference is, and then why did you? Not to throw two questions at you at once, but then why not cast? Why didn't you cast locally the first time?
Well, I'm going to take your second question first. We did actually cast locally the first time, but the first time was in New York.
Oh, okay.
So that's where that cast started.
Okay, so you brought the same cast from New York to LA.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and they also have been in, it was a crazy trajectory. They've been in Chicago, they've been in North Carolina, they've been in Louisville, we've been in Edinburgh, and then back to New York, and also in the Hamptons. The same cast would, just everybody just helped make it happen. It was really it was completely run on girl power. It was all women, and they all made it happen. But when it came to this production in LA, it just wasn't possible anymore.
Sure, 100%. Yeah, I understand.
So that's why we cast locally here. It obviously made more sense.
And now hearing that, obviously New York is more of a theater town. It's a totally different approach. It shouldn't be, but it's a very, very different approach compared to how LA actors, approach things. Talk about the process of what made you want to write this particular play, and then how deep into history did you go, and did you take any creative license in that regard?
Definitely took creative license. I heard this story. I was actually, I won't go into too much detail, but I was in Indianapolis with a writing partner at the time, and we had a play that had launched there in Bloomington, and we were kind of waiting for to go to the airport, and so we went to this war museum, and as we were going through this World War II exhibit, he said to me, "Do you read you read that story about those young women who were like Hitler's food tasters?" And he started walking away. And I was like, "Wait, halt, stop, come back. What did you just say?" He said, "The young women who were conscripted to be Hitler's food tasters." And I said, "Are you going to write that? Because if you're not going to write that, I'm going to write that." He said, "I'm not going to write that." And he sort of walked away. And every once in a while, as an artist, you just get a gift from the universe and something falls into you, and you know that is something that's for you.
Right.
I didn't write it right away. I was working on other things. It was always in the back of my head, and I was determined that I was going to do all the research in the world for this play. And my husband, who is a writer and also a historian, was super excited to show me World War II movies and buy me books. And I have books on what, protocol for Hitler during Hitler's birthday, how you're supposed to behave. And I have books on fashion in the Third Reich. And I have this huge stack of books. And I said, I'm going to read all the books and do all the research. All I really knew was that Hitler used, inexplicably, young German women to test his food for poison. Not Jews, not homosexuals, not all the people that he railed against. Not they said gypsies at the time. I think the current parlance is Roma. Hitler hated a lot of people, and he did not use them to test his food for poison. He used young German women who were meant to bear the sons for the future of the Reich. And that was enough for me. And so I actually participated. I was in a playwright group at Pacific Resident Theater at the time, and we did one of those 24-hour or 48-hour playwright challenges where you get some prompts, and then you have to start writing a play, and you have to write a play in 48 hours. And I remember sitting down to my computer and saying, "I am not going to write that Hitler's Tasters play. I'm not going to write that Hitler's Tasters play. I have not done my research." I sat down and went, "Oh, shit." And the next thing I knew, I was writing that play. It was just living. It was living in me. And then, I went back, obviously.
Sure.
That first, sort of vomit draft was not the final thing.
Sure.
And I could add to it from there.
Did you get that all done in 48 hours of full length?
I did write the whole thing in 48 hours. Again, not fully cooked. But the shape of it is exactly the same. And all I know for sure is that every question I could possibly have about the way of the world and life and the universe, and my concern about young women, and my concern about certain political figures, and my concern about, it all manifested in that play. Like something in my internal system lined up and was supposed to write that play.
Had you gotten any research done before you sat down and that this 48-hour play had come into
Well, I read there were articles about this woman, Margot Volk, who came forward in her 90s. She was German, and she told the story about being one of Hitler's food tasters. So I did read those articles about her. There's not a lot.
So then that's why I ask. So
Yes.
if you didn't really get the chance to, because all of a sudden this 48, I'm going to write this play, and then all of a sudden next thing you are writing it. How much did you get right? Did they get anything wrong? And how much when you did more research afterwards, how much more got put in? Or did you really just somehow everything was just perfect and you didn't really need to do any more research?
Everything was perfect, James. There was no more research about these women. There was no more information about these women that I could tell. I incorporated what she said. And then I went from my own impulses. And the research that I did later was more sort of context, sort of World War II, what was happening around them. What did Hitler eat? What I read a little bit about how he preferred to take his meals with his secretaries rather than with his, generals, because he had some stomach issues, and so it made him feel more relaxed to eat with some of the. I learned these little things that aren't overt in the play, but they informed the way that I the way that I worked on the play.
Okay. Having gone, because I think you listed like maybe 6 cities. How was the reception in the market from compared to each of those? You know, from going to Chicago to New York to Edinburgh to Indianapolis, you say?
To Louisville.
Okay.
Louisville. And Selma, North Carolina. I actually wasn't at that one. It's the only one I wasn't at. I have been amazed by the reception for it. You know, in the very beginning, people were concerned about some of the things before they saw it, because there are anachronisms. So it's okay to tell this because you can see it in some of the promotion. But the girls all have cell phones, and the cell phones are a big part of their lives. And there were some people that really like their Hitler straight up. They do not like a crossover of World War II and girls' cell phones. But I did it for a very deliberate reason. And so in a couple of readings, some people sort of went, huh? And there were a couple of people who were concerned. But then once the play was what it was, they seemed to just accept it. There are references to, as I said, some contemporary politics, and there were a couple of people. There was one guy that walked out that was mad in Chicago, and there was I didn't hear it, but apparently there was also a couple when it first launched in New Jersey. It won this Women's Playwrights Festival, and there was a couple that got very upset when there was a reference that was made, but they were kind of trapped in the theater. It was a small, they couldn't get out. But other than that, I think all in all, I've been, knock wood, it's had a pretty good reception.
Sure. Good.
There have been a couple of people who've refused to review it because the name Hitler is in the title. And,
interesting.
They were upset by that and thought I was trying to capitalize on something. Or make light of something, which
I don't quite see. I'm not in their head, so I'm not quite sure where that could come into play, but okay.
Yeah. I've had Holocaust survivors see it that were really behind it. I had there was a woman that I met in New Jersey who had been she hadn't been one of his tasters, but she had been a young German woman at the time, and had actually been at the Olympics when Jesse Owens won and Hitler stormed out, and she told me that story, and she thought it was an important story to tell. So I believe that we've found some kind of balance that makes it okay for people, for the most part. I mean, some of it is upsetting. It's meant to be. I had a woman come up to me after a show and said, "Was I meant to be upset when this thing happened?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Okay, I just want to make sure."
You had you got your MFA in fiction writing at Otis. Was the intention to go in and study playwriting, and that's just what they offered, or did you go in, intending maybe I want to be a novelist, and then all of a sudden you have this introduction to playwriting, or reintroduction to playwriting, if you will, and that's what made you want to do it? What's the trajectory there?
It's a good question. So my background is as a journalist.
Oh,
I worked in public radio. So I respect the audio.
I appreciate
quite
that.
a bit. And I did that for years. And I started kind of fiddling around with playwriting, and by a number of coincidences, some things started to get seen a little bit here and there. And then I always wanted to write fiction. And I don't know, I thought I didn't really understand. I really knew nothing about playwriting or really theater when I started. It was just kind of an impulse. And I thought, I had one experience with a play, and I thought, I think I just need me and words. I'm not sure that I know how to, I don't really understand actors. I don't really understand this whole process. I think it just needs to be me and words. And so so it was later, it was much later. I went to get my MFA, many years after I got my BA, at fiction writing. But while I was working on a book and while I was studying fiction writing, some of my plays started getting done. And, writing a book is a lot of words.
Yeah.
That's a lot of words. And I still do love writing fiction. But it was funny in the time I sort of went, I kind of say like I sort of went with the boy who loved me. Like I felt like the playwriting was somehow forcing its way through. And I really, what I loved about participating in it was kind of like what I loved about working when as a journalist, being in editorial meetings where there was a group of really smart, interesting people sitting around and having ideas, and everybody was building off everybody's ideas, and you throw things around and you end up going down avenues that you don't expect. Same thing with the theater, is that when I'm working with actors and a director and all the other people that come into play, suddenly the world of what I'm doing opens up in a different way, and it makes me, I think, can make the work smarter and more interesting, and so that collaboration was really exciting to me. So there was kind of like a lot of push-pull, but the playwriting just it took on a little bit of a life of its own. But I really didn't understand anything about it, and I kind of stumbled my way in. And probably had I known how much I didn't know, I wouldn't have done it in the first place. So I'm glad that I went into it kind of stupidly, and I just kind of fell in love with it. I mean, it also like makes me crazy and makes me want to tear my hair out. It makes me scream, and why don't you see it the way I see it? And how could you possibly say things that way? And I still have that sort of like that old sense of like wanting to control it.
Is this like with the director or with the actors or anything like that? Okay, interesting.
With a set or something, like, what do you think? What? How did you get that? But it's also delightful,
sure.
And so I feel like when you're in theater, I don't know, you're just really in the mess. You're just really in the mess of life, and there's something very appealing about that. And also, you're sitting there in the audience and like, they don't laugh. It's not funny, or that, you really get that immediate, you can't really fool yourself, right? When you're doing theater. I don't know. So I still dabble in fiction, and I dabble in all kinds of things, but this seems to be the place where I think I make the most sense.
How hard was it to transition from one medium to another when you went from writing journalism and then into playwriting? How did that? Was there a learning curve? Was there habits you had to break? Like, no, that's not.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a huge learning curve. But the interesting thing about having worked in audio, I was a producer, and I did some on-air work, and I was an editor, and I used to literally edit tape. So used to do with a razor blade, right, and cut sound. So I really had to learn to listen to the way that people talk, and to the way that people communicate with each other. And I also had to edit for time, because I had to produce a show every week that had to be, what was it, like 54 minutes or something. So nothing was precious. What I could like hold on to something that I loved in a show for only so much time, and then the thing had to get on the freaking air, and I couldn't be precious about it. And so I think that those lessons were really valuable going into playwriting, because I really learned to listen to and people have oftentimes commented on my dialogue, and I think I don't think that in day-to-day life I'm a fantastic conversationalist, but I really do know how to listen to the way that people talk. And I've always been, a bit of a, eavesdropper anyway. I like to listen to people's conversations and play around with them. And so I think that was really valuable. And I think writing for time was valuable, because I've learned to, even if it's something that I think is really, I'm like, wow, look at this thing that I've just written. It's so beautiful and it's so wonderful. And sometimes it just doesn't have its place in a piece. And sometimes, for a particular production, I've cut something out because it wasn't something that actor, I don't want to say couldn't do, but it just, it didn't work. I might try it somewhere else,
Sure.
but it didn't work in that moment, in that time. So I don't hold on. It's not to say that I never do, but I do realize that things can be sacrificed, and that I can survive,
Sure.
and the play can survive.
You said that you don't consider yourself a good conversationalist. Now, does that interfere with writing dialogue?
Well, I think the great thing about writing dialogue, right, is that I can get it right. I don't have to do it in the moment. I don't have the anxiety of an interview and I'm going to say something stupid or go off on a crazy tangent or have an incomplete sentence or lose a word. Sometimes I lose a word, and but the fun of writing dialogue is that I can get it right. I can get that zinger in that I couldn't get in real life. I couldn't think of in the moment. I can just be more thoughtful. I can be more poetic. So I think maybe writing dialogue for me is just a big giant correction, for day-to-day life. I don't know, but I enjoy it.
When it comes to, because I haven't realized that I hadn't really discussed this for a while. And it's just one of sometimes the fun little aspects of playwriting is like character names. Mm-hmm. Where do you, do you put a lot of thought into character names?
That's a good question. I think that they kind of reveal themselves somehow. With this play, with Hitler's Tasters. I
would imagine you use the actual names or...
No, I didn't know any other names.
Oh, okay.
But I did. So I did know Margot Volk. So I did name one character after her. I named a character after Anne Frank.
Okay.
That was deliberate. The other two names, I just kind of thought about German names, and the ones that came to me, I sort of looked them up to make sure I had them right, and they seemed like the right names, and I used them. And I also realized later on, because I went back afterwards and read Diary of Anne Frank, and I had forgotten that Anne's sister's name was also Margot. So it was nice to have that,
happy accident.
Yeah,
or maybe not.
Or maybe not.
An
Who
accident.
knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Okay, but sure. But that's it. So that's Hitler's Tasters. But what about other ones? And what about like surnames and stuff like that? If you even use them, I'm just curious.
Do I use surnames? Well, it depends. I mean, I do take a lot of material from real life, and so if I'm writing about real life people, then luckily that's been gifted to me.
Sure.
For instance, I have this other play that's about to open in the weekend before Hitler's Tasters. It's kind of a crazy time. That is a docu-play that I did where I interviewed, over lockdown, I interviewed 50 teens around the country about the fears of their generation. And I didn't want to use their real names.
Sure. Yeah.
So I had to rename all of them. And, that was a little bit like I would just sort of wait to see for a name to occur to me that sounded like their name. So I would, because there's a lot of characters. And so trying to keep track of them, I tried to find names that felt similar to those names. So I think with every play it's different. I don't think I have a system.
Sometimes I get a little too like, it's got to be symbolic. It's got to, especially when it comes to surnames, that how does this apply to their personality and stuff like that. So I'm just curious if I put too much thought or look, into it. Is there an aspect of what aspect may not be the right word, but what part of playwriting is your favorite? What is just like, ooh, this is, is it, would you say it's certain aspects of story? Is it transitions? Is it dialogue? Is it character? Is it theme? Is it throwing little Easter eggs in there?
I think I write out of a certain sense of anxiety.
When you only have 48 hours to get it out.
Certainly in that situation, yeah. I wrote this piece recently for Zocalo Public Square about what I call the wait what moment, where I hear something, like I hear Adolf Hitler used young German girls to taste his food for poisoning, and I go, wait, what? Wait, what? And when I have that wait what moment, I know that that's something for me that I want to explore. And so that's one of my favorite pieces of it, is landing on that moment. And I know it's one of those moments because it's pesky, because it doesn't go away, right? Yeah. It gnaws at me. But another play of mine called Rue 1214 is based on the Parkland shooting. As you can see, I like to keep it light. I'd always wanted to do something about gun violence, but I mean, for God's sake, what do you do that isn't, more absurd than what we deal with in real life? But I had this opportunity to interview one of the teachers whose classroom was shot into. I met her completely on accident, and I was working on this play, and it was very important to me to get this, you want to get them all right, of course. But I'm talking about a real incident, and I'm talking about something just god-awful that happened. And I want to honor the people involved. So I knew I had to get it right. And I was sweating and sweating and sweating this play. And then at some moment, I felt the spine of it crack, and I found a way in. And I found a way in that I felt like was particularly mine, and was the reason that I was writing it, right? There's all kinds of people could write this story, but the reason that I was writing it.
Sure.
And when I cracked that, and I could write from there, and I realized I might do all this for years and sweating and crying and screaming and eating too much and whatever it is, for that moment to crack it and figure out why I'm doing it. It might just be a form of therapy. I can't tell you for sure.
It's come up a lot lately in these episodes.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think that moment of cracking it and why I'm doing this and why it makes sense for me is so enormously gratifying personally. And then, whether it gets done or not, like there's so many other things that are up to the gods.
Sure, yeah.
So for me, I think that's the most important thing. And then the fun is when I get to be in the room with all the people. And I remember the first time I had a play done, even just a reading. And everybody, I kept thinking, oh my God, they believed me. Right? Like I wrote some stuff down and they believed me that this was a real thing, and they're doing it and they're taking it seriously. I have never gotten over that. It's always delightful to me. Oh my God, they believe me. That's a real thrill. And then watching how they bring themselves to it, So there's a lot of things to delight in. And there's a lot of things to, curse about. Yeah. But I think those are my favorites.
What does that process look like when you said when you crack it and you finally find that one thing? If you're reeling in it, what is that process? Are you writing it? You're just retelling it, or just going through the whole story over and over again, and then it finally clicks? I mean, or do you actually really? Is there a real process to it for you?
There isn't a specific process to it. I'm a little bit of a chaotic writer, and I have to. Generally, I find I'm in the writing.
Okay, so you're writing.
I'm actually writing.
Okay, got it.
When something, like the fingers are on the keyboard, and suddenly, and I've been sweating it out, and suddenly something makes sense. I find, for me, I generally don't know what I'm going to write until I start writing.
Sure.
There's something that happens when the fingers hit the keyboard that's a connection for me that doesn't happen even... I can frame things, I can do outlines, I can do all that. Yeah. But the real emotion of it, the real heart of it, happens actually in the writing.
Are there any wait what moments that you didn't pursue or chase after?
Well, there's one now that if I don't get on it, somebody else is going to grab it. So there's that.
But I mean, is that necessarily true? And what I mean by that is, like, sure, they might grab it, but it's not going to be your take.
Correct. Right. The problem
or does that come from a journalist place where I gotta
get the scoop?
I gotta get the scoop.
Probably.
Yeah.
There's probably a little bit of that. And there's a little bit of, realistically out in the world, right? If I have a play about something, if I have a play about the Parkland shooting, it's a very specific take, but some theaters will say, well, we already did gun violence. Right. Even though I think mine is a completely different thing. With H TLER'S Tasters, I've had some theaters say to me, well, we're not doing any more Holocaust plays. Well, actually, it's not a Holocaust play. I don't see it as a Holocaust play. You can't talk about Germans and Nazis in World War II without, of course, that hanging around it. Yeah. But it's not a Holocaust play. These are young German women. Right. So there's always that. And obviously you can't get too caught up in those concerns because God knows how long it's going to take you to write the play. God knows how long it's going to take before it gets done. Things change, cultures change, artistic directors change. You never know. Right. But there's always that, I guess, yes, because I come from a different kind of a background than just a purely artistic background. There's those concerns can kind of not me.
Sure. Where do you start? Do you always start at the beginning of the play, or do you have a specific scene and then do you form it around there, or is it just a linear process? Yeah, I usually start at the beginning. Sometimes I will go through and I have an idea for something, and I will write down from the beginning every single thing that I can think of that might. Unfortunately, I'm not very good at outlining, but like just far behind you. sort of just a vomiting of every single thing I can think of that could possibly happen, or any ideas or names or just thoughts. And are those phrases, or are they complete sentences, or just whatever? It's just a bunch of notes. It's just kind of a brainstorming thing. Yeah, could be all kinds of things. Cannot happen for me writing with my hand, like writing with a piece of paper. Like it has to happen on a computer. Interesting. So that things can be sort of moved around. The computer gives me that freedom. Also, I can't read my own handwriting anymore, so that idea is out. Everybody else just can't read mine. I can still decipher it for the most part. But I tend to begin at the beginning. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Just curious. And then, are there what did you struggle with that you overcame when you first started? How did you fix it, if you did, if there was a way that you could fix it, or maybe just finally clicked, or was like, oh, now I get it? Because sometimes you don't know. It's just all of a sudden you just, all of the things that you hear and you've learned fall into place. And then, are there any things that you still struggle with now? Oh, well, I struggle with the whole thing. But I think in the beginning it was just that I just really didn't really know how it worked. I didn't realize that you probably had to limit how many people you have on stage, or nobody's going to produce it if you've got 24 people on stage. Although in Project Fear, the teen project I told you about, there are 24 people on stage. But that was made for like a school, I just, I don't know. I didn't know about things like inciting incidents. I didn't know about, I think I probably had a lot of exposition in the beginning, but I don't know. I find that there are I think every time I do it, I like to think that I become a better writer. Sure, yeah. And I'm not as afraid of it as I used to be. Right, yeah. And most importantly, I think what I've learned over time is you just got to jump in. You got to sit your butt down and sit at the computer. It's not going to magically, ideas, you might get the wait what moment, but the whole thing's not going to just sit down and write itself for you. Right. And that it's a lot of sweat and a lot of frustration, and then a lot of delight, and it's just going to be all the things, and you have to get through,
you can survive it and you can get through it. And also, for sure, I've learned you can't get nothing from nothing. Like, if you don't sit down and just put your fingers on the keyboard, nothing's going to happen. It's never going to be perfect. And you got to be okay with kind of making a mess. And even when people first read it, I would get sort of embarrassed if I would hear like a line that wasn't very good, and now I'm like, it's okay. It's going to be a mess until it's not.
Sure. How do you write exposition? Well.
Well, that's always the challenge, isn't it? Right? You don't want to say everything that's coming into somebody's head. You want to have subtext. You don't want to say, like, as I sit here at this black table with this microphone in front of my face, I had to learn to think in I had gone from a background of audio. I had to think about pictures. I had to think about, although actually I think audio helped inform that a lot, because I had to describe, you have to describe a picture, doing like feature stories. You have to describe what's happening around you. But you don't want to over describe, and you want to hint, and it's fun to have people. It's more fun to have people not saying what they're saying, right? Than just having them say it. That's not as interesting. But sometimes you have to kind of blurt it out that way at first on the page, and then find a way for them to say it in a less direct way.
Sure.
But you can always tell. You can always tell when you're watching a play with a lot of exposition, because you just get bored.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're like, I can do this in real life.
Yeah.
I can listen to a conversation in real life, but I'm here in a theater because I want something, an elevated experience.
Sure. Yeah. You had just mentioned. Oh goodness, where did it go? You were talking about like when you hear a line, and I don't like the way that sounds, and I get to do the way that you fix it. So, or at least I would understand how you go and fix that. But what do you do this on the first draft? After you finish your first draft, do you go back through it first, or do you say, okay, I want to hear it so I know where to fix it, or do you just go back through and reread it and edit as you go? Are you editing while you write? Mm-hmm. What's your editing process after that first draft, or even during the first draft? I don't know.
Well, I love editing. Maybe it was like that journalistic background, but I love editing. Sometimes I cut stuff out just for fun and then put it back, just to see what happens. Okay. But I tend to, as I said, kind of write in a blah. I don't have a better word for it than that. Just a blah, a vomit. And then sort of fast and frantically. And then I tend to like give it a rest and go back and let myself have the fun of like just slashing words and moving things around.
When you say moving things around, what are you moving?
Moving. Maybe I gave the dialogue to the wrong person. Maybe I have a scene. Scene 4 should be like up in scene 2. Maybe I just, or there's something I'm like, well, there's something interesting in that, but I don't think it makes sense right here. So I'm going to put it to the side and maybe go back to it later. We'll see if it's useful later. But what was really interesting, I've done, I think 3 of these 48-hour play challenges. And the thing about those is you have to start, the rule in the ones that I did was you have to start and you're not allowed to go back and edit. You're not allowed to fix.
Oh, wow.
You're only allowed to go forward. So you have to write from top to bottom, and then you bring it in and you read it, and it has to be gets read by actors. It's terrifying.
Sure, yeah.
But but you're going into a non-judgmental space.
Hopefully.
At least they're going to be quiet about their judgment. But what's amazing about it is it was amazing how consistent some of the threads were. Like when you're operating, for me anyway, when I'm operating, it's almost on the subconscious level, right? Because you don't have time to judge yourself. You don't have time to edit. You can't go back. And it was funny how sometimes I had the same joke or the same thought more than once. I was following the same thread. And then I have this one play where there's a woman who has she rescues birds. And so at the beginning of the play when I wrote it, she had like 13 birds. And then later on in the play, I couldn't remember how many birds she had. So then it became like 30 birds, and then it became like 42 birds. And by the end, she had like 56 birds. And I thought, oh, this is a great bit. Like, she never admits how many birds she has, right? She's embarrassed about her birds. So it ended up becoming a part of the play. So I think the great thing about doing something like that is that you just don't, you tap in such a subconscious way.
Sure, yeah.
And sometimes for me, I trust that even in terms of shaping more than I do my own conscious brain to shape something.
You talked about that you had 24 characters in one play.
It started as more, I'm just going to admit.
So do you know how many, that's what I was going to ask, do you know how many characters you're going to have when you start? Or do you just, sometimes do you just, all right, when do you introduce a new character?
I think it's been different in most of them. Sometimes a character just like muscles their way in.
Sure, yeah.
I'm trying to think different play. Hitler's Tasters, I was very firmly set on. Well, I started with these 3 characters, and then I didn't realize until halfway through it that there was going to be another one. With the docu-plays that I've done, I interview a lot of people, and I don't really know how many are going to end up, in the final cut. It's a good question. I think it just varies. I think I'm not very consistent.
It depends on the piece. Okay,
Yeah,
that's fair. That's fair.
I'm not
Yeah.
very consistent. Yeah.
You had mentioned that you weren't, when you got to that 48-hour festival in which Hitler's Tasters came out, and you mentioned that there's also prompts as well. Did you find that, I'm assuming those prompts made it in, whatever those things that they gave you.
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah. How did that work? Was that just a happy accident? I'm not going to write this play, but I'm going to find a way to where I've got these prompts that is going to allow me to.
Right. Yeah. Well, the great thing about a prompt is when you get stuck and you have to use a prompt, you can just kind of use a prompt. Mm-hmm. And so, and you might go off on a completely crazy tangent, but I don't know. They all seem to kind of, like, for instance, one of the prompts for Hitler's Tasters, I don't remember them all, but one was bells are ringing. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I remember looking at it going, oh, I think I'm going to start this scene with the bells ringing.
Interesting. And
then that precipitated a scene. I didn't know what was going to happen in that scene.
Sure.
I just put the bells in there, and the scene developed from there. So it's kind of a fun challenge to have to work the prompts in.
Bells can mean a lot of things. So did you go with your first instinct of what that bell is? Is that because it's Hitler's Tasters, it's dinner time? Is it this is the bell
I didn't
ring?
think of that.
Is it church bells? And it's, but now it's noon, so it's time for lunch. Did you go through different options and then finally settle on one, or is it like, this is what it's going to be? And if you don't mind, what was that? What bell did you go with?
I went through that the girls were hearing bells from the outside. It was like Sunday church kind of bells.
Got it. Okay.
And then that got them talking about, they say, oh, it's nice that they still ring the bells, even though they're in war. So it was a familiar sound to them. And then it turns out, and I didn't know this until I started writing it, that one of the girls' fathers is an officer, and he told her that the bells ring, they're different rings for different messages.
Interesting.
I didn't know that was going to happen.
Right.
Had somebody not given me a prompt for bells, I don't know that ever would have come out in the play. So I feel like you can always use something.
Yeah, 100%.
You'd have to take. I was once writing I was doing another one, and I was in the middle of it, and I was super irritated and frustrated, and I said, I called my playwriting partner at the time, and I said, I'm so irritated, and I just want to write a story. My husband loves like all these old horror movies, and I said, I'm just going to write about like giant ants. And my writing partner said, well, just use the ants. And I was like, oh. I threw in some ants, and the next thing I knew, I had somebody shooting at ants on the floor. It's just like, you can use anything. You just have to remember that you can.
Sure.
Okay. And that nothing is set in stone in the beginning, and it's a great way to open up your imagination and take a turn that you wouldn't have expected.
Do you use prompts yourself?
I don't for myself, but I've loved when I've been given them. It's been fun, but the last couple, I did not give myself prompts. I probably wouldn't listen to myself. Like if I'm accountable, this is again the journalist in me.
Sure.
If I'm accountable to somebody else, I'll be a good soldier.
Right.
But if it's just me, I might not use the rules.
Are there exercises that you do when you write? Do you write out backstory for your characters? You
Sometimes.
know everything about them, or?
No, I mean, I will. Like I said, I do take some of the plays are based on true events,
Sure,
and so I will do my research on those events and take notes about it. But and then anything that sparks from that, I'll write it. But I don't have a system. I don't have any systems.
What's your least favorite thing about playwriting?
Playwriting. I don't know. The actual writing of it.
Sure. How do you get through it? How do you get yourself to sit down and write? What's the trick that you use?
You know what I've learned? I just have to sit. It's literally a matter of sitting and just doing it. Stop researching, get off the internet. I also am fortunate or unfortunate, depending, fortunate to live with a writer. And my husband is one of those writers that always writes. And he goes into his office every single day, no matter what's going on. And he also is a big outliner. He does tons and tons. He writes books mostly, and he does tons and tons of research for his books. And so he shames me into, but just by association, by the amount of writing that he does. So sometimes it's, in the spirit of competition.
Sure.
But I've just learned over the years, like there's no, you can only have magic if you sit yourself down. You don't get the magic by, you can get a lot by walking around in the world, but you don't get a script by anything else but just sitting your butt down and doing it.
So you don't get distracted at home. You don't have to go somewhere. You don't have a haven that you go to.
Sometimes I do. Sometimes I do. The people in my house are very talky people, and sometimes I say, I can't, all of you, I need to go. I just need to get out, and they get it. And so sometimes I'll go. Sometimes if I just really need the space, I really need quiet and I need no distractions, sometimes I will go away for 2 or 3 days. But otherwise, sometimes I like to write in a coffee shop, or sometimes I like to write at my dining room table instead of at my desk. And I like to kind of move around. Again, it just kind of depends on what I'm doing.
You kind of laid out some hints with this when you said you made some suggestions, and that the actresses are doing or the characters are doing whatever girls do. How detailed are your stage directions, or do you kind of just always suggest? Are they?
Well, so one thing I didn't understand about putting up a play is that some directors don't believe in stage directions. I actually was quite horrified by that in the beginning, because I thought, I I don't believe that I write stage directions in order to control the environment so much, but I believe that I write stage directions because they are saying something about the play, and that sometimes they're moving something forward. And so I can't, certainly once a play is, if I'm in the room, I can certainly say, hey, I think you need to pay attention to that.
Right.
There are some also directors that don't believe in having a playwright in the room, so that's a whole other thing. But
that's against the Playwright's Bill of Rights.
Yeah, right. But once, I have a couple plays that are published, or sometimes a play just gets done somewhere else and I can't be there. So I will write in stage directions that I feel are very, not necessarily specific to what they're doing, but what the intention is.
Right,
that this is what they are doing. They are doing this because this is how they feel, or they are doing this to distract themselves from the truth that they might die. Like why there's a stage direction here.
Do you have an example offhand of what that stage direction? And I always do this. There's always one question I always ask because you're not in the moment of writing, so you may not be able to draw upon an example. So I apologize for that if you can't.
Well, I have one stage direction in Hitler's Tasters that you will see, but you wouldn't know that I put it in there. Is that there's at one time two of the girls are fighting, and I say, it is abundantly clear that they have no experience fighting, right? So to be able to say like they are, I'm not going to tell you how they fight, but and it's physical. That the point is that they've never had a fist fight before, right? Yeah. So make it look like that. That I think that's kind of a good example. I have it in another play. I have these two older characters who are kind of getting drunk, and they're sort of entertaining. They're entertaining each other, but they're entertaining themselves with the clever things that they think they're saying. And so I say, they toast to being adorable, just to like know what's behind it, right? Without without trying to over explain everything, but to try to give a sense. I saw a play by Annie Baker in New York, and I'm blanking on the name. The one about the movie theater, the flick. And they had some of her plays in the lobby that you could thumb through. And I was looking at her stage directions, and they're very specific. And she says, when I say a beat, I mean 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi. And I thought, it must be good to be Annie Baker. She gets to say that, right? I feel like nobody would pay attention if I said that. But I was intrigued by that. I'm always intrigued by how much I can put in and how much will be taken in.
Sure. Yeah. So
I kind of feel like, you know what? I'm going to throw in the whole enchilada, and because some people are going to ignore it and some people won't.
Well, how does this? I'm assuming, has this fist fight been staged already? Well, it's been staged a zillion times. So what does that look like? Because obviously it's stage combat. You're not really, hitting. Well, I mean, maybe they do. I don't know. Maybe they do pull hair. I don't know. I mean, what is that? How's it looked realistic when giving that stage direction? How do you make that look realistic and to where somebody's not getting hurt? Right.
Well, I think, in that situation, you just have to trust. You have to trust your director, and you have to trust your whoever they bring in, like a stage fighting expert or whoever it is, to make it look. I mean, it's meant to look real. I think in the world of the play, it's clear that it's meant to look realistic. So who are the experts who can do that? Right. I think it looks fantastic. I think it has looked fantastic seeing it staged. Sure. I know Sarah, this director that I work with, is very much about keeping everybody safe. She will not let anybody do some of these stage directions very fast until they really, really know them. She makes them do everything at halftime. They do a fight call before every single show.
And when I ask you that's not on the assumption that it's your responsibility. Obviously, I always recommend, if I'm working with younger playwrights, I'm like, that's something you don't have to worry about. You don't have to go into detail about this. That's why you have a designer. That's why you have a director, have those things. So, and that's when I ask you that, that's not to say, how did you do that? But rather, has it looked realistic in those times? Mm-hmm. With that stage direction, have you been pleased with the results, I suppose?
I really have. I mean, I'm lucky that I really have. Okay. But again, I have only seen it with this one director. As besides readings, I actually just found out it's opening in Australia this weekend.
Same director?
No.
I'm just joking.
No, I have no idea who they are, how they, I guess
that's great. Sure.
Right. So I don't know what they're doing. I wish I could see it, but so they might do it in a completely different way, but the good news and the bad news is that I'll never know.
Which was leading me up to this question anyway. So once you said that, you're like, I don't know, I'm not going to be able to see it. What is the worst rendition of your work that you've ever seen? And what was it? Not necessarily when you say what was it, you don't have to name what, but what was it that really just like turned you off, and then how did you deal with it, and et cetera, et cetera?
Well, as I think there's not much you can do, right? If you haven't been involved with it, and you're coming in cold.
I don't know. I've heard people pull the plug.
Oh wow, God, I would never do that. I can't imagine the circumstances in which I can do that, only because, unless they were taking a wildly different stance. Like if I found out that Hitler's Tasters was being done in a way that was somehow pro-Hitler, like I would pull the plug.
Sure.
I had another play go to a couple places where I was like, oh, it really made me cringe.
How so?
I don't know. I didn't think that the actors really knew what they were supposed to be doing. Didn't feel like they had a firm hand in the direction. I felt like they were misinterpreting. Sometimes I just didn't think the actors would not be actors that I chose. But they were in their production, and then I would just, I was in town for some talkbacks, and the audience wasn't seeing the things that were upsetting me.
Okay. Okay.
And I mean, I didn't ask them, obviously, but they stayed. Like they didn't throw tomatoes, so okay. I have seen posters of my plays. This one particular play that I wrote with this writing partner, every once in a while we'll stumble across. This one seems to get done a lot, and I called him once and I said, "Do we have a bullfighting scene in our play?" And he said, "No, why do you ask?" And I said, "Well, because I feel like this poster indicates a bullfight." And he looked it up and he's like, I don't know how they got that in the, so, but what are you going to do? And I really do feel like it's a miracle for anything to get up on a stage and get done. And, so I try to let go a little bit and realize that what might be horrifying to me might not necessarily be to somebody else. And then sometimes I just, move on. Just move on.
Fair enough. I've told this story before, and I had Daniel Guyton on, going back and talking about getting rid of stage directions, and he went and saw one of his shows, and he was really confused. And he had gone to the director after. He's like, "What happened to the stabbing?" He's like, "Oh, we erased all the stage directions."
A stabbing seems like a fairly 100%. Important thing to happen.
100%. So yeah.
It's a plot point.
Yeah, exactly. So on that note, in regards to have you ever, because obviously you're looking around, you're seeing that there's productions being done. Have you ever stumbled upon a production of yours that wasn't authorized?
Not exactly. I had something that's been really lovely for me is that a lot of young women, like in colleges, have found Hitler's Tasters and wanted to do scenes from it or do readings of it as their first directorial debut. Not doing a full production. It did, and most of them will write to me before it got published and would write to me, and I would say, have it. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, enjoy. Like, wonderful. There was a student somewhere who she very innocently like tagged me on Instagram, and I thought, and I called my manager and I said, did the play get licensed? And he said, no, what's going on? And so I said, look, it's okay. But he said, yeah, but the person that runs the theater department needs to know that they didn't license it. They didn't get permission. It's also a good learning.
So this is an actual production. This is not like a scene, or they're not doing it for the Irene Reiner the College Playwright Festival, not College Playwright, I'm sorry, American College Theater Festival.
Yeah, I think it was, I don't think that there were more than like 2 or 3 shows, but still. But yeah, and I said, tell the theater, tell them I'm not mad. It's okay, but something that they need to know. And then I felt really bad because she untagged me. Oh. And I was like, I wanted to be your favorite playwright, not your least. But there's protocol that you do have to follow. But
that might not have come from her though either. That might have been like, if that phone call got made, her instructor, her director, or whatever was, what are you thinking? What were you even thinking?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. It could have been, and you just never know. But I don't know if other unauthorized. I don't think there have been unauthorized productions, but I don't know.
I had another guest. I think it was Susan Goodell. I think it was Susan, but she would come up with clever titles that Google alerts would go off.
Yeah.
To let her know when her play was being done.
That's
and there's
smart.
a couple of times that people I've had a couple of playwrights where they've discovered that they had some stuff that was out there that wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah,
and
I have heard that.
Yeah,
I have heard that. Yeah, I'm of so many minds about that. I mean, there are protocols that have to be followed, and there's just a part of me that thinks, oh, somebody liked my play.
No, sure, 100%. I know, but I mean, it is a business. And
Of course. No, but it's. I've had a couple of inquiries, amazingly, from Iran, from a director in Tehran who wanted to do Hitler's Tasters, and was also interested. There's a whole long story behind that. Actually, it turned out that maybe it wasn't a good idea to give it to them, but I said, sure, here, God bless, right? It was before it was published, and they actually did send it to me in Farsi. And I had somebody look at it, and they said, "Oh, this is a good version." I said, "You can have the play because you can't. I can't sell something in Tehran, right? You can't do that. There's like national security issues, but I said, God bless. I did some research, and I said, I just would love pictures, right? Just like, but they never sent me anything, so I don't know if they ever did it.
Right.
And it also,
or if they'd even be allowed,
Yeah,
I mean, to picture-wise, or even to do the production, I don't know.
I know. I didn't quite know how that was going to work, but I'll just try to make this very short. I do have a friend who works in national security, and I had told him, I said, oh, it's so funny. I was asked, and he said, you can't do that. He said they're not after that play. It's very likely they're going to ask you for your other play that talks about the Iran hostage crisis. And he said what can happen is that they will find the big they, but they're
Sure.
In the world of espionage, right? They will find artists who they think could be friendly towards them, and they will say, hey, come to Paris. We want to meet you. We'll bring you out to Paris and we'll put you up at this hotel and we're going to talk about your play. And then later on, we want you to have to come to Tehran and do your play here. And it's not that they're going to, imprison me or something, but they will want you to be very friendly toward them and then write things that are friendly about their regime.
Right.
And I said, that's ridiculous. Like, no, why would anybody I'm nobody. No, why would anybody find me? And he said, you'd be surprised. Wow. And then, sure enough, they did ask for that other play. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I can't send that to you because it's somebody else has licensed it. And to this day, I don't know. I don't know. I was delighted by the fact that somebody think I could be some kind of useful spy idiot, But it was just a really funny thing that came up. I don't know. I hope they did do it, and I hope they brought a certain spin to it that I couldn't imagine.
Total change of subject,
yeah.
And it's really goofy. But every time this is where my brain goes when I see Hitler's Tasters. Choice is what I want to come after that. I don't know if you remember Taster's Choice. It was a very instant coffee.
Oh yeah.
So I just have this image in my head where he's like, it's where they switch his coffee to decaf or something. Right. I don't know. That's where my brain works.
That's funny.
How do people mostly find your work? When do they reach out directly to you, or how much of it is through your agent manager or through the license or the publisher?
Mm-hmm. Well, once it's published, it's mostly through the publisher.
Sure. Okay.
Hitler's Tasters happened because I sent it out to a women's playwrights festival. I just sent it cold,
okay. And
it ended up winning. Some things are sent out cold. Some things, I'm always interested in trying to find other ways to do things. I have this play, War Words, that is also a docuplay. I got interested. I knew nobody in the military, but my husband knows. He's on some kind of military think tanks, and I wasn't, he would talk about military histories, and I would hear to like wah wah wah, and then but then he started telling me about some of the people that he was meeting, and I thought, I should. They're not what I thought they were. I had a very clear idea of who people in the military were. And so I said, somebody ought to go through and interview these people and do like vagina monologues for the military. And anyway, through a series of coincidences, I met somebody who was really interested in theater, but with the Atlantic Council, which is a think tank. And I started working with them to develop this play because they are interested in translating national security issues to a greater population to get us more invested in what's happening in our country and in our world. And so they ended up sponsoring Hitler's Tasters. War Words initially. It moved on to other things, and now actually I'm really excited because War Words is going to have a reading at the Library of Congress.
Oh, wow.
And they have a veteran storytelling initiative there. And then they've asked me to donate my interviews to part of their collection. And so I'm always trying to look for other ways to do things that aren't necessarily the usual ways, because sending stuff
a little
out,
untraditional.
Yeah, a little untraditional. It's kind of interesting. I kind of get to put my old producer's brain on things, and then sometimes you're hitting audiences that would just never see something. But sometimes it's just a matter of submitting, or I know, I'll go to a director I know or say, hey, would you take a look at this? What do you think? Or an actor, what do you think? And I find it's just that one person that always has to believe in something that helps you, lug it forward. So
you're pretty proactive about finding your own opportunities for production rather than relying on somebody else to get it out there.
I've from the beginning I've kind of had to be, because I didn't know how the world worked, and because I'm not somebody who's angling for a TV gig.
Sure.
Certainly, especially when I started out, it's I think as playwriting is not generally, you're not generally going to get a windfall from it. And so an agent is more interested in somebody that's also interested in television. That's gonna, you know what I mean? So I've had to, but I also kind of enjoy it. I enjoy like trying to figure things out and strategize a little bit. I do appreciate that I have a little more momentum now and I don't have to push the boulder up the hill quite as much. But for the most part, I've been pretty involved in seeking out opportunities.
What are you working on right now?
So right now, I have this play, Room 1214, about the Parkland shooting. I have had a couple of readings of it, but just one reading each. That play is slotted to open in New York in the fall. But I have a really great opportunity. It was accepted for Florida at Florida Rep, their play lab. I'm going there in May to workshop that for a few days and then do a stage reading there. I'm really excited because that event happened in Florida. I'm really excited to do that in front of a Florida audience and see what I get back. See if I get run out of town. Entirely possible. So I'm still, right now I'm very involved with the production of these other two plays that are happening in LA right now. And then I'm sort of still noodling around with that, trying to get it where it needs to be. So I'm not working on anything brand new.
Sure, right. What does it like what does it entail to be a playwright-in-residence?
Well, with New York Rep, it was a little loosey-goosey, the definition, but they asked me to just listen to some ideas, look at some things, and then they produced War Words just last November. In this particular case, it didn't seem as particularly defined as I've heard being a player in residence as other places. Technically I wasn't in residence. I was in LA and they're in New York, but it got me to New York.
Anybody.
Don't tell. Secret.
So I know that a couple of your plays are published, and who are they published through?
One is published through TRW. Okay. And the other is Dramatist Play Service.
Got it. And where can people find the rest of your work if they're interested?
If they're on New Play Exchange and NPN, I have all my plays up there. Or people can contact me through my website and happily, have my manager send stuff off. Okay. I'm not particular. I'll let anybody read anything.
And lastly, are you on the socials?
I am on the socials. You can find me on Instagram at Michelle Kholos Brooks. That's Kholos Brooks. It's just Brooks, and Michelle with 2 L's. I got to come up with a better name in my next life. And then I am also on the Twitter/X, but not so much. And on the Facebook, it's pretty much it. I have not been able to stomach migrating over to TikTok.
Oh, I'm right there with you. Can't do it.
It's a lot.
Yeah, these are already a lot. I can't even do these anymore.
Yeah, it is. It's a full-time job. It's a full-time job.
The truth.
This posting and all these things, but it's a necessary evil.
Yep, exactly the word I was looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, Michelle Kholos Brooks, thank you for coming on to the Playwright Spotlight.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Again, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share this show with your friends. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. And in the meantime, and until we see each other again, keep writing.